I don't know what I'm doing in here. Whee! Whee! Greetings. Talk to me. Hello. What do you want me to do?
Originally released in 1989, I'm going to go ahead and say for the Commodore 64 first. No information on Wikipedia there, but I got some reviews for the Commodore 64 in the June-ish era of 1989, and the DOS and Amiga reviews seem to be coming later in the fall of 89, so I'm going to say Commodore 64 original. And it seemed to have simultaneous releases in the fall of 89 for the MS-DOS and the Amiga and the Atari ST. And a little bit later, 1993, it even got a port to the Nintendo Entertainment System. Developed by Westwood Associates, an American company, but we didn't make any games in America for the Commodore 64 after 85. It will be published in America by Strategic Simulations Incorporated, the rights holder to TSR's Dungeons and Dragons. Over in Europe, it would be published by US Gold. Today we're covering the Amiga version, which is a straight port of the DOS game. Full 16-color EGA palette for your enjoyment. For the most part, it's still graphically appealing for 1989. It's, the only unfortunate things there when you do a straight port from EGA is it's the little things. All you got to do is make the faces more peach instead of red, which is what DOS went with because they didn't have a peach color. I'd still have to call this the definitive version of the game because of things like the sound. Obviously, you just heard that wonderful music track. I'd call that the obvious best of all the other versions. The DOS version doesn't even have intro music at all. And then you have the sounds like your horseback riding and just walking in the streets. Those can get quite annoying via the PC speaker, I have to tell you. Yeah, and it is those little things that can cause you just to go crazy and hate a game. Those little PC speaker noises, if they are on the annoying side, they can ruin a game for you with DOS. So, I would say if you're going to play this game, play it on the Amiga or the Commodore 64. The Commodore 64 features completely different graphics set, so you might actually prefer the 64 graphics, perhaps. As does the NES. I think the next time I play this game, I'll check out the NES version, which there's a couple things. It doesn't have like the 3D view in the town itself, but it looks like a competent version to me from what I've seen of it. I mean, they're all. You can play the DOS version or play the ST version. It's all the same game, no matter where you go. But I've seen people look at this one with DOS and they seem to absolutely hate it, and that's where I was coming originally. I thought I was going to not like this one. We'll get into that more later, but I wanted to check out the manual first and get you a little taste of the introduction from the manual, which is essential reading always in order to immerse yourself into these official D&D games, I believe. While not a gold box game, it's a silver box, I believe, but it does take place in the Forgotten Realms saga, right after Pool of Radiance. Specifically, this is the prequel, as you will, of the second game in the Gold Box line, which is Curse of the Azure Bonds. Be sure to check out my Pool of Radiance review in the little annotation there or in the descriptions and such. And we'll be covering Curse of the Azure Bonds sometime this year, I believe. And I've also already covered the beginning of the Dragonlance computer games in the Gold Box line. I have covered Champions of Krynn, and be sure to check that one out as well. Introduction to Hillsfar. After weeks of hard campaigning, your supplies and rations are all but exhausted. Your party sets up camp just outside of Hillsfar. You had thought to make a quick stop at the city to gather supplies, maybe drop into your guild to see what things are like. You had no idea what you were getting into as you stepped through the gates. Hillsfar was the most open city on the Moonsea until the council was overthrown. The merchant mage, Mathiller, self-proclaimed first lord of Hillsfar, now rules the region with an iron fist. Shrewd, ruthless, and independent, he hasn't made many allies, and Hillsfar struggles to hold its own against the surrounding power lords who eye the wealthy port city with greedy interest. Law and order are maintained by the dreaded Red Plumes, the Thillers, mercenary guild who stalk the city and day, watching all. But a city under tight control is a city of opportunity to any worthwhile adventurer. With no weapons and little magic, your wits and agility are your best chance to overcome the puzzles and mysteries surrounding Hillsfar. Have you the right tools to pick that complicated lock? Think you can hold your own in the arena? Glancing up at the scowling red plumes guarding the gate, you certainly hope so. No one ever said that adventuring was easy. And stepping through the gates to enter Hillsfar, you begin to realize why. So when SSI pitched themselves to TSR, remember there were a lot of companies vying for the official D&D license at the time, including Electronic Arts. And EA's bid was higher than SSI's, but they went with SSI because of the pitch, and the pitch was, we actually care about this stuff. We're not looking just to make a quick buck. We have this, we have the experience with these war games, and we're gonna implement the role-playing line into that engine kind of thing. We're gonna have that. It's gonna be role-playing, but it's not only gonna be just role-playing. We're gonna expand it into other areas, like they did Heroes of the Lance, and they did Hillsfar here. And it's like they're gonna be connected, but they're gonna not be connected. It's gonna be its own thing. They're gonna have a whole different bunch of lines and stuff. We are going to own the computer market, and we're gonna make games for years.
Son of a bitch.
And that was what got them the contract, and they indeed fulfilled it. They made games for years.
Oh, I got
And
him.
SSI,
I hit him and I went.
they knew their strengths and their weaknesses. They knew they could make,
This would be a great comeback.
the bird's eye kind of, they knew they could do the role-playing element because it was so combat-oriented, and they had that experience with the war games in the past. They knew they could do that, and they could do that well, and they indeed did that well. The Gold Box games are the absolute best role-playing combat you are going to find, possibly ever. So when it came to those Gold Box games, they were in charge. SSI completely in charge of those games, but they knew how to farm the other series out as well, and they even knew how to farm out the Gold Box games when it came to the ports, because again, SSI only did a few of the Amiga ports themselves, and they did them well, by the way. Like Champions of Kryn was developed in-house by SSI for the Amiga. But they knew how to properly farm out the games as well, to make sure, like Ubisoft did Pool of Radiance for the Amiga, and they did that one excellent. But SSI was not used to side-scrollers, for example, so I believe they farmed out Heroes of the Lance, the action-adventure. They farmed that one out to US Gold, and US Gold, they did not usually develop games. They usually published them, but US Gold was in charge of the Heroes of the Lance action-adventure line of Silverbox games. And they farmed this one here out to Westwood Associates. For anyone who thinks this game is like a black eye on the series, well, I guess SSI and TSR didn't think so, because they had no problem going back to Westwood Associates when it came to going into that 3D, more dungeon master kind of style, when they did Eye of the Beholder, one of the most beloved RPGs of all time there. So Hillsfar is classified as an action-adventure, just like a Heroes of the Lance is, but it's very different from Heroes of the Lance, which is making it into a platforming game while retaining those TSR rules. So it's heavily combat-oriented, and it's using those dice rolls quite a bit. The only real combat in Hillsfar is what you're seeing right here in the arena here, and I imagine they are using TSR rules here, but you're just fighting with a stick, no weapons there, but it's very hard to get used to this arena combat. I kind of developed a strategy of forgetting about blocking altogether. I couldn't really figure out, I read the manual even, and I know how to block, but I couldn't get the feel of blocking right, so I eventually figured out a strategy of just attack after attack after attack. You attack enough, he won't be able to attack you. You just keep attacking, and then you switch it up. Go left, 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 right, right, left, left, right, right. up on top. Eventually you'll get a hit, and then there's some minor strategy from there to maybe get a second hit on him. So the arena combat can be frustrating at times, but once I figured it out, it was enjoyable for me in a change of pace kind of way, and that is the essential ingredient to enjoying this game. It's the change of pace that it offers you in comparison to the Gold Box game. Now, I have a history with this game, and it dates back years. I remember we had this one for the Amiga. I remember the disc specifically. I don't really remember my dad playing it, but I remember having it. Never played it on the Amiga back in the day. Got it in a collection of SSI Gold Box games in the late 90s, the Silver Collection. And my biggest memories of this game involve sitting down to play it, wanting to play it, booting it up for DOS, and later on, several times for the Amiga. I've gone back to this game like every 5 years or so. I attempt to go back to this game, and I just sit there, and I don't do anything with it. I didn't get it. I just never got this game. Now, I never really got on board with the hate train that seems to surround people that review this game these days. I just never understood it. I sat down, I wanted to play it, and I just couldn't. Like, it didn't draw me in. And it's hard to hate a game that you don't actually play. That's the thing. I never hated this game. I just didn't understand it. And I kind of feel that's the way a lot of the reviewers who are coming at it these days are kind of in. They don't actually play it. And I think if they actually sit down, that's what I did this time. I sat down determined that I was going to beat this game this time. And through that process of actually forcing myself to play it, I began to like it. In the beginning of the video, you saw that little funny clip where I'm like, I died or whatever. I fell off the horse, and I'm like going, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. And that was exactly how I started off. And I posted that to Twitter, and then I got like quite a positive response from people. Like, they were saying, oh my God, I loved that game. I loved Hillsfar. And suddenly I'm like, oh wow, I guess it's not like I imagined it when I'm watching people review the game, because the consensus with modern reviewers is that it's not a good game. And I'm like, oh wow, there are people out there that really like the game. It's not just, one person likes the game. No, nobody didn't like it when I was posting this stuff on Twitter, and I'm like, wow, I need to look deeper into this. And then I'm looking at the reviews from back in the day, and I'm like, oh, wow. They seem to like it too, actually, for the most part. It doesn't mean I'm going to like it just because other people like the game, but it does mean that once I get that feeling that there are people who really like the game, that is when I know I need to be respectful of it. That's when I know I need to give it the proper shot, because it deserves a proper shot. When there's a very passionate group of people that like a game, you make a review that the biggest fans will enjoy if you like a game. And if you don't like it, you have to do it in a way that the biggest fans are going to respect you. So when I was playing through Hillsfar, and I'm trying to get my feelings around how I actually feel about it, I realized that there was no way I could make a review where I hated the game and make the biggest fans respect it. I couldn't review it in a way fans would respect. Yes, I can make jokes. I can absolutely make jokes about certain things. I can point out things like right here where there's no parallax scrolling. Well, DOS wasn't very good at parallax scrolling. The Amiga could do it, but DOS was not the greatest at the time at doing parallax scrolling. And I could point out these things and say how it's just so different from the beloved Gold Box games. I could take a critical eye to it, but there was no way I could personally do it to where the biggest fans would respect me. And that's when I became more open to like, just the little things. When I'm playing the arena, and then I found out, when I finally beat the guy for the first time, and I'm like, you could hear me earlier, and I was like, oh, I think I'm starting to like this game. And it was those little things I slowly started to be endeared to the game. And the more I played it, the more I realized it actually is an essential stop in the Forgotten Realms tour of the Gold Box games. I played the Gold Box games multiple times, never gave this one a shot, and then as I'm playing through it and I'm noticing this wonderful text. And that's the thing I love so much about the Gold Box games. Yes, it has wonderful combat, the best combat in a role-playing game. And I realized that there were reviewers of the time that never really respected the Gold Box games, like Scorpia comes to mind, who even when she kind of liked it, she always it's just hack and slash, even though she liked Eye of the Beholder, a game that is all hack and slash as far as I'm concerned, and I still like Eye of the Beholder, but she wants to say how much better Eye of the Beholder is, and it's not really. Scorpia was a traditional Bard's Tale ilk kind of role-playing person. She had no interest in the war games, and that is where the Gold Box games were coming with the combat. She did not like the combat of the Gold Box games, and they were revolutionary. She would rather just hit A to attack, and to me, that is what is hack and slash. When you just press a button over and over and over again, when there's no, Gold Box games are like chess with combat. It's wonderful. No, but the combat is tedious. There's no getting around that. And what makes them worth playing is the story. It's about the journey with those games. It's not about the destination. And it is that, slowly as you build up, you are getting this constant feed of wonderful story. And that is what this game has most in common with the Gold Box games, far more so than the Silver Box Heroes of the Lance action adventures. This game just features endless story, and it's good story. Let's switch gears and go into some magazine reviews from the era. We're going to start off with Info. Info actually covered this game multiple times in multiple issues, but we're going to start here with July-August of 1989, where you can check up on the adventures of Bryce, the cartoon series in Info occasionally, where his Amiga dies, oh no, and it bursts into flame with a red screen of death there. But where he takes it to the good old repair shop, and eventually he gets it back after he's quite satisfied after paying a frickin' fortune to have that thing fixed. They're checking out the Commodore 64 version here because it came out first. They give it 4 out of 5 stars. Hillsfar combines the traditional city adventuring method of hunt and peek with exciting action sequences such as equestrian and archery events, gladiatorial combat, and maze running. Each game changes to suit your character's class, and you can transfer characters from Pool of Radiance. Hillsfar is rich in depth and detail with lots of adventure and action. They would come back to it in the January-February issue of 1990. Where they also take a look at Commodore in the media, different movies and such that the 64 or the Amiga have been spotted in. I'm particularly interested in this episode of ALF they're talking about. Amiga 2000 was prominently featured in the 10/9/89 episode of ALF. ALF uses the Amiga for computer stock trading with disastrous results. I did a little look for that one on YouTube, and I couldn't find it. Covering the Amiga version, and again giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Hillsfar is an enchanting graphic adventure from the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons series. The one-character role-playing quest has lots of action, adventure, and puzzles. Unlike Bonds and Pool, Hillsfar concentrates on solving puzzles and completing quests rather than fighting strategic battles. You could spend a fantasy lifetime in Hillsfar completing all 3 quests for each character. I have only 2 minor complaints. I wish the programmers had taken the time to enhance the sound effects and music for the Amiga version. They should also have found a way to avoid the lengthy disk accesses that interrupt the pace of the game. As you venture from one quadrant of the city to another, shortcomings aside, you can count on a rousing good romp through a richly detailed, beautifully illustrated fantasy kingdom. Judith Kilbury Cobb. Wow, it's nice to see a non-Scorpion female reviewing a game back then. I like, and probably more importantly, respect Scorpio, but as someone who liked to poke at games in sometimes, not so wonderful ways, things where it didn't seem fair, the pokes, you want to poke at somebody, don't cry when somebody pokes back. So I like poking at her too. From the previous issue of Info, November-December of 1989, in their first annual Top 10 Games lists. When you talk to your accountant at tax time, you may insist that you need your computer for word processing, spreadsheets, and databases, but we all know why you really bought one: to play games. And you own a Commodore computer because Commodore has always made the best game-playing computers money can buy. The Commodore 64 is the least expensive, most powerful 8-bit graphics and sound machine ever built, and the Amiga holds that title among the 16-bits. And not only are they great game machines, you can buy more games for the Commodore 64 and Amiga than for all the other game-playing machines in the world combined. And that includes Sega and Nintendo. That is true, but I wouldn't be proud of that fact, because although there were over 1,000 games made for the Amiga, and probably 2,000 for the Commodore 64, and the Nintendo probably only a couple hundred, largely that list would be, especially when you go to the European budget games, largely that I would say, a good 600 of them are probably awful. From the Best Quests of '89 section, Hillsfar was the year's best action adventure, and the only one of SSI's AD&D titles I've enjoyed. Well, don't say you enjoy a game and then destroy another one in the process there. But it's a one-character RPG that tosses you into the arena to fight orcs and mixes in several more action sequences as you explore Hillsfar in the vicinity with 3 quests for each character class. You get a lot of game here. Pool and curse characters may be imported or fresh ones created. The lock-picking puzzles are original and fun. You've got to match several picks with the tumblers shown on screen before an animated fuse burns it down. So you have 4 guilds in the game: Fighter, Thief, Cleric, and Mage. And with those guilds offer 4 unique-ish quests. I'll be showing you 2 in the video: the Fighter and the Cleric. The Mage and the Thief are going to be reserved for the Shot97retro.blogspot.com review, the written review there. And while the text given to you for each guild is all pretty much unique, the basic concepts and they're all fetch quests for the most part. You go to one area, you get or find a person that they want you to find, and they'll send you to another area. It's typical questing there. I immensely enjoyed the first try at it with the Fighter here. I'd say probably took me the most time to beat this one. And then I took like a week off, and then I played the next one, and again I took another week off. I think that's the way you got to do this in order to experience it right. You could probably plow through it quite quickly in an hour or two. Each individual guild, so that's 8 hours for the whole game if you plow through it, which but you want to take your time, immerse yourself into this stuff. Here I am ending the Fighter Guild quests here. You're famous now. You should look for further adventures in the city of Tilberton and SSI's Curse of the Azure Bonds. And yes, that was a selling feature in the advertisements. You could import characters from Pool of Radiance or Curse of the Azure Bonds, and you could export them back to Curse of the Azure Bonds, not Pool of Radiance. Neither for the Amiga, as far as I can tell. I spent over an hour and a half attempting in various different ways to export Pool of Radiance characters or export Curse of the Azure Bonds characters into Hillsfar here. I could not get it to happen. I even checked the Amiga reference specific guide, and there was nothing on transferring characters, so I imagine they're just going with the standard manual there, and I did everything the standard manual said, and more, and no, the Amiga version of Hillsfar actually came out before Pool of Radiance did on the Amiga, so I imagine they just were not thinking of these specific save files for those games. I wouldn't be surprised if you could take the Hillsfar characters from the Amiga and transfer them straight to DOS, actually, because this is such a straight DOS port. And the reason you would want to do that is because at the end of each character's quest in Hillsfar, you will get a quite significant boost in your hit points. The Curse of the Azure Bonds will somehow know that your characters have been through Hillsfar, and you will get a few more journal entries, and I think even a couple battles. You might be joined, might have some extra friends to help you out there. But for the Amiga, I just treated it as a standalone adventure and created new characters. Well, I still based them the same names as my Pool of Radiance characters, but they are not imported from Pool of Radiance. Let's plow through a few more reviews from the time. From Amiga Resource, April of 1990. Hillsfar is basically an arcade game with a Dungeons & Dragons motif. AD&D people will find the lack of conversation and the wit disappointing. And arcade aficionados may want a game with more action and sound. Nevertheless, Hillsfar offers something for everyone and does so with speedy graphics and decent animation. From September of '89, where Curse of the Azure Bonds rates Computer Gaming World's cover. The two seem to be released at the same time for DOS. From Roe Adams, Hillsfar belongs to the budding genre of action adventures, whereby the joystick-driven arcade action is as relevant to a player's success as the role-playing. For those players who like to run thief characters, Hillsfar offers, without a shadow of the doubt, the best simulation of thieving skills ever done in any medium, not just on computers. As much as I grew to like the game, I say the thieving... I saved this thief to the very last thing I did for the written review. It did not interest me, and I successfully picked one lock before they all got ridiculous. You can get, 15 tumblers. I can't imagine people going through it, and it's so tedious. While the storylines of each quest are interesting and promise much in the way of excitement, the graphics and implementation do not measure up to the promise. The map is full of mysterious-sounding locations like the Ghost Lake, Wizard's Forest, Labyrinth, Dragon Skeleton, and Shipwreck, yet a visit to every place yields the same-looking graphic modules. It goes into much more that I don't like about the game, but the bottom line is Hillsfar is a must-buy for those who aspire to become a super thief. Otherwise, imagine the absurdity of doing major Cleric quests without being able to cast any spells at all. With me, the things he didn't like about the game, I liked them, and the thing he liked most about the game, the thief, is the thing I liked the least, actually. And lockpicking with the thief is by no means actually required in this game. And Hillsfar, the very same issue in which it was reviewed, would make the top 100 list for readers' input, I believe, at 100 exactly. Hillsfar would end up selling 78,418 copies, very good for that era of computer games, although not nearly as much as a lot of the gold box games, which some of them reached 200,000, or at least 100,000 usually, but very respectable numbers for a $50 game. From Compute. If you've grown accustomed to fighting your battles by repeatedly pressing A to attack your enemies with a battle axe, or C to cast your favorite deadly spells, neither of which were a staple of the gold box games, by the way, you're in for a big surprise when you reach the arena. Likes the arena quite a bit. While Hillsfar isn't the first role-playing game to include graphics, animation, or arcade-style sequences, it does a much better job of integrating these high-quality sequences into the story than many others do. Bob Gora. From Commodore Magazine. I've never quibbled about my less than enthusiastic regard for action adventures, but with the innovations of Times of Lore and other recent releases, that sentiment has slowly begun to shift. Now, SSI Hillsfar is pushing that particular envelope even further, offering the first AD&D scenario involving arcade-style challenges, 5 of them, that center on a series of quests in the Forgotten Realms. The only thing he really didn't like was the fact that you always had to go back to camp in order to save your game. Hillsfar is an invigorating change of pace, and with so many different quests for the 4 classes, it provides exceptionally high replay value. Now for the British perspective, Amiga Computing. Some of the little sequences you stumble upon, like the arena for example, are quite entertaining and graphically effective, but they're too much to keep the interest above critical boredom level. Lucinda but the actual scores is about a 72% overall. From Advanced Computer Entertainment. There's an advertisement for the games in the magazine, also noting that October is AD&D month. Hillsfar is nicely presented, and the gameplay is pitched quite well, but there really isn't much here to keep you entertained for long. Ace rating of 750. From Amiga Format. There's no RPG system more famous than the AD&D one, and SSI have spent the last couple of years trying to capture, if not the whole system, then at least the feel of it on computer. Heroes of the Lance was the first to appear and turned out to be more of an arcade adventure than anything else. Then Pool of Radiance came out and was much more like the original system. And now Hillsfar, the second in the series to appear on the Amiga. That would be after Heroes of the Lance, because Pool of Radiance did not come out until 1990 on the Amiga. It's always difficult to produce a good game that's a distinct mix of two very different styles without upsetting the purists. SSI have tried very hard and succeeded at doing just that. For arcade fans who fancy a bash as something else in between the action events, and for adventurers who fancy a side of the action, then this is just the sort of thing. Andy Smith, Graphics 6, Sound 4, and Intellect 5, Addiction 7, overall 72%. I'm going to take you back to the manual, show off the quite awesome Dragon's Eye view of Hillsfar and vicinity, hand-drawn here, and this is this really helps to bring you into the game, if you ask me. Some more excellent immersion here for you. Hillsfar prospered despite of competition from other major cities around the Moonsea. Flan and Zental Keep rose to power and fell from grace, while Hillsfar prospered by trading between the Moonsea reaches and the Elven Court. Hillsfar has changed under Mithiller's administration. On one hand, his rule has brought order to a chaotic and corrupt city. On the other, he has destroyed the Elven heritage that made Hillsfar a special place. With Mithiller at the helm, Hillsfar has become a more human, more oppressive, and more expansionist. It is now but an unfortunate mirror of its ancient rivals that also ring the Moonsea. Good luck, lad, no matter which way you travel, and you have fun in the civilized Southlands. Look forward to more adventuring in the upcoming AD&D Forgotten Realms Curse of the Azure Bonds computer fantasy role-playing game. Well, final thoughts. Now, my impression from Wikipedia was they were saying that this game had mixed reviews back in the day, and I don't know where they got their review information from. Probably Moby, because Moby only lists a couple reviews, and those are indeed rather mixed. Now, my impression was actually that, generally speaking, they actually thought it was good. The game was overall good. Maybe a couple of them actually thought it was great. And the worst anybody ever said about it was that, it was not exactly up to snuff, or was a little boring, or there wasn't much there, it didn't offer you too much overall. Nobody didn't like it. So I think that's an important perspective for modern reviewers to get from the old school reviewers, because generally my impression from today with the modern reviewers is that they really don't like it. It's not just that there isn't enough there, it doesn't live up to the gold box games, it's they do not enjoy, they hate it almost. I feel more enriched as a fan of the gold box games playing this game. I loved that I played this game. At $50, perhaps it was a little on the steep side in price back then, but then again, I got a month of playtime out of this one, playing it as I imagine it should be played. But even if you plow through it, 4 quests, I think about 2 hours each. If you plow through, that's a good chunk of game time there. If you ask me, I don't think it's a quick game at all. And I only showed off 4 characters, and, add 2 more hours if you're going to import all of your characters from Pool of Radiance. I wouldn't really do that. I think it would definitely get a little tedious if you were to import your characters from Pool of Radiance to transfer them to Curse. But as a standalone adventure that definitely gets you in the mood to play some Curse of the Azure Bonds after Pool of Radiance, I think this one is something special. Sorry that I took so long to actually get to this all these years. Hope you will check out my written review at shot97retro.blogspot.com, where I will show off the Thief and the Mage characters for Hillsfar. Always an active one on Twitter, twitter.com/shot97retro. And please check out my reviews for Pool of Radiance, Champions of Krynn, King's Bounty, and Might and Magic 3. See you all later. Hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye.